Welcome to the Playbook, a Bible study podcast where we dive deep into God's Word and discover how it serves as the ultimate guide for our lives. Each episode builds off the last, giving you a deeper understanding of Scripture and how to apply it to everyday life. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button and click the bell so you don't miss a study session. Now, let's open the Playbook.
Hey, welcome back to the Playbook. Back here again with Zach and Cole, and I was a terrible host last time, and I didn't really introduce our friend Cole. And I kind of like what you said was, you know, he's too ugly just to not kind of dissect him. And then
we probably lost all our viewers in the first 30 seconds. Did you cut over that quick?
So, Cole, tell us a little bit about who Cole is.
And if he's lying, I'll let y'all know.
There we go.
I didn't mind not being introduced because I like it like that. Just, you know, we're on the side. But I've been saved since 2012. Well, really November 2011, and really sold out 2011, and just serving the Lord. And married, got 3 kids, 1 grandbaby, and just probably shouldn't be sitting at this table doing what we're doing. Yeah. So thank you, Lord, for using us, and that's really about it, man.
Yeah, Cole said something right before we cut the cameras on, and he said he was unqualified, and that's really something that I battle with. I mean, if you look at the grand scheme of things, we're probably all unqualified. And
see our last podcast.
Yeah, yeah. So I feel you on that one. I get into that spot sometimes, and so especially when they start putting cameras and microphones in your face, right? So, well, we went through Matthew chapter 1 last week, and so we'll get into chapter 2. Zach, you want to maybe quick summary of chapter 1? Is that something we want to do?
Yeah, that's fine. Through Matthew 1, we talked about the what the Old Testament is and what the New Testament is, and we went through the Old Testament as a covenant that God gave to Adam, Noah, Abraham, and David, all being fulfilled through the birth of Christ and being of the house of David. So we went through a lot of, I don't want to say we went heavy into prophecy, but we just referenced over so many. There's so many prophecies that are fulfilled in Matthew 1. So we talked about a lot of Jesus' ancestors and his great-grandparents and people of that nature, and then brought it into, the righteousness of Joseph, which is why he was selected to be the husband to Mary. He was probably one of the only men that could handle being told what he was told. Angels, Gabriel and other angels sent messengers, to tell Mary and Joseph, tell Joseph not to leave, right? And then right before that, well, at the end of that, as we go into this right here, you're going to see how they, they fly into Egypt and all that stuff. And so really it's just a setting up of the fulfillment of the prophecies of the Old Covenant.
Yeah.
Good deal. All right. Well, let's jump into chapter 2, and we'll go through for the first little section, and we'll pause and break it down a little bit, and then we'll get the rest of it in there. And it says, "So now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, in the days of the king Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, 'Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him.' When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Gathering together and all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They said to him, 'In Bethlehem of Judea, for this is what has been written by the prophet.' And it says, 'And you, Bethlehem, land of Judah, are by no means least among the leaders of Judah. For out of you shall come forth a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel.' Then Herod secretly called the Magi and determined from them the exact time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, 'Go and search carefully for the child. And when you have found him, report to me, so I may too come and worship him.' After hearing the king, they went their way, and the star which they had seen in the east went on before them until it came and stood over the place where the child was. When they saw their star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. After coming into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell to the ground and worshipped him. Then, opening their treasures, they presented to him a gift of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned by God in a dream not to return to Herod, the Magi left for their own country by another way. And so basically that's Christmas for you, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and dive into that. And I guess we'll just kind of start back at the beginning. This is a story that a lot of people know, especially this is the one that I was familiar with when I was a kid. Mom had the nativity scene at Christmas time, and I always kind of check that out. And basically, that's what this is, right? It's Jesus being born and the wise men coming to him, but it's a lot more than that. And so, Zach, I'll kick it over to you, and you can kind of start breaking it down for us.
All right. Well, just be upfront foremost. Not a lot of meat in Matthew chapter 2, unless you're just a really good biblical scholar, which none of us are. Just, some old country dudes that love the Bible.
That's right.
But what you do see here, I think the wise men play a key role. A lot of us just know who the three wise men were. We know they brought the gold, the frankincense, and myrrh. What does that symbolize? What's the symbolism there? It's just a fulfillment of another prophecy from Isaiah chapter 60. It says that the multitude of the camels will cover their land, and they shall come and bring frankincense and myrrh, and they will bless the name of the Lord. And what's crazy is they were Gentiles.
It's even more crazy to me that this star.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to think, we didn't have no real cities like we have today.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They can see the stars back then way more than we can see them.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have light, nothing like that. Yeah.
So like this star must have been something special.
Yeah.
Like for them to say, that's the one we've been waiting on, because it was a prophecy. Mm-hmm. They was waiting on this star and waiting. I mean, that's when they went to Herod and said, we know this because of this prophecy.
Right. Yeah.
This star means the Messiah is here, and so I would really love to know what that star looked like. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think another thing there is we talked about it in the last podcast, but the significance of Bethlehem. Yeah. Right. It's not a coincidence that he was born in Bethlehem. That was also another prophecy that had been told. And then Bethlehem was promised that. We see that in verse 6. It says, in Bethlehem in the land of Judah, or not the least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Now, there were several that came from that Bethlehem, right? Now, this is a specific to Jesus, but also David came out of Bethlehem, right? And he was a shepherd. That's what he was before he became king. He was a shepherd, and he did rule over the people of Israel. And, I believe Jesus followed suit, obviously, and then much, much greater things came from that. But it's just pretty cool when you take that and you go back to, say, the story of Ruth and Boaz, and you see that, as I said in the last podcast. And once again, this is not me stating a fact. This is me stating a belief. And, over so many, there's so much to take in when you read the Bible, right? But you do see some things line up and link together. And it does seem that it's possible that the land that Ruth was gleaning over, that Boaz owned, did eventually, it only makes sense that David was shepherding on that land, right? Because that was his grandparents.
Right.
Boaz and Ruth were his grandparents. He came from Obed into Jesse, and then Jesse to David. And I don't think it's far-fetched at all to say that same land that Ruth was gleaning over is the same land that David was shepherding on. And when you think of the size of Bethlehem, it's very small. And it does seem that Boaz owned the majority of Bethlehem because he was very wealthy. There were not many wealthy people. They often laugh at Bethlehem, right? It's picked on a lot because it's kind of a poor area, right? And then we do see that Jesus come from that. So it's not far-fetched to believe that not only that land, the same land that David shepherded on, but was possibly the same land that this star led them to and that Jesus was born in.
Yeah.
So, I do see that, once again, not a lot of meat in Matthew chapter 2. But one thing I do think that we can sit on for a little bit is something we like to call discernment. Yeah?
Yeah.
We see it in verse 7 and 8 where Herod tries to convince the wise men, when you find him, please let me know where he's at so I can come and worship him as well.
Yeah.
I think the wise men picked up on game. They were called the wise men.
Yeah.
They weren't called the three fools. I think they were like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's lead this king to the man that's going to dethrone him. So I think as a Christian, that's something that we can look at and say, well, that's where your godly discernment comes in.
Yeah, and I think another thing that because you drop down to verse 12 and it says they were warned in a dream by God, and so they probably had that discernment and kind of understood like, hey, we can't tell this dude where this baby's at.
All they had to do was tell him, hey, follow that star.
Yeah, that's it. But then God kind of confirms it to him, later on, like, hey, it's not a good idea to let him know about that. So
I know you talked about this a little bit.
Well, I think Herod, at the end of the day, same reason the Pharaoh wanted to kill Moses is because if a king, that's what they were told, this is a king of the Jews, right? He rises up in his mind, he's a king. Well, he's going to kill me and take the throne. That was the whole reason that he wanted to kill him. On top of that, we can get into Satan's tactics and all that too, on the spiritual side. But, just as a man, as Herod, he just didn't want to be overthrown because I would think that the Jews probably outnumbered whatever he was.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Same thing with Pharaoh way back with Moses. He knew that if the right person was to rise up, they were outnumbered.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's why he wanted to kill all the kids. And, and now Herod's the same way. Didn't want to be overthrown.
Do you see this? Now, I don't want to get too far into it.
Zach's famous
Just to make
words.
this interesting. Do we see this as God manipulating or God predestining things happening? So,
what do you mean by manipulating?
So, the same as with Moses, right? Messengers were sent out. People saw. God manipulated situations to give warning, to let them know, right, that this was about to happen. So, when Joseph, they were about to read, Joseph flights into Egypt to get away from King Herod. It was a message that was sent directly to Joseph. Do you see that as God getting involved or God just letting it play out?
I mean, if we're going back on the whole predestination thing.
I'm not necessarily going to predestination, but maybe foreknew. I think this falls under foreknowledge.
I mean, at the end of the day, God's sovereign and sees the whole picture all done one time. It's over with. But we also have free will. I don't put God in the box where he's limited on what he can and can't do because we have free will. I think God created the box. But I do believe that there, just like you said on the last one, is that there is certain people in the Bible that were going to do what they've set out to do. I mean, he hardened Pharaoh's heart.
Well, I'm not
Pharaoh
so much
did what he was supposed to do on the earth.
Yeah. Well, I'm not so much going into predestination. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, a thing that people love to talk about today, and rightfully so. And man, look, we're all trying to figure this thing out, right? So, just so everybody understands, me and Cole are best friends. Been best friends since I moved here in 2012, right? We've been best friends for going on over 10 years now. We do not agree on everything in this book. I think people need to understand that first and foremost. Yeah. We are both, he's one of the strongest Christians I know, and we do not agree on a lot of stuff, and that's totally fine.
Right.
We're all trying to figure this stuff out.
We agree on what matters.
Exactly. And there are certain things that do matter, and you do have to agree on. So other things, I believe God leaves it up to the mysteries of God to intrigue us, right? And we always have found this to be an intriguing thing. So a big thing that Christians talk about today is my will, free will, free will, free will, free will. It does seem that God gets involved on people's free will, though, right? In situations like this, God gets in the situation. There's too much at hand. Right?
Yeah, it's too fragile.
There's too much at hand. I mean, you went through all this lineage in the first chapter. All that was for a reason, right? And it's just too much at hand to leave it up to chance. I think some things God does get involved with and puts his finger on certain things a certain way. Say, hey, you'll be safe. First off, I didn't know a Jew could ever be saved in Egypt, but apparently, hey, you're actually going to be safer in Egypt than in Israel.
Yeah.
That speaks of the times right there already.
Right.
But God says, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too far, but, I do think it does invoke some thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. I think even today that God can get involved in our life
100%.
personally. And
we can also push the will of God, right?
Yeah.
He does say that. He says that he'll never turn away from a broken and contrite spirit. You see Abraham standing in front of Sodom and Gomorrah and pleading God. Now, ultimately, God's will was done, but it's because God knew more than what Abraham knew. He said, I'm telling you, Abraham, there's not 10 righteous men in this city.
Yeah.
But, he was still pleading, and because of his righteousness, he was able to get a little time.
Yeah.
And I do think that as much as God can come in, because I do believe in the sovereignty of God, that he is in full and utter control of the entire universe, I do believe that God will get involved in certain things. Other things, he'll let it play out. So, one thing we didn't talk about a whole lot was the amount of generations between Abraham and Jesus.
Right.
Man, it was 42 generations between Abraham and Jesus. So God gave Abraham a promise, and 42 generations later, the promise is fulfilled. That is a long time.
Yeah.
So, even though I just believe God's in control, and I believe, God's about to give Joseph some insight on, hey, this is how you keep your family safe.
Yeah.
definitely.
Good. That's good stuff. All right. So let's go starting back. Verse 13. It says, now when they had gone, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, get up, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to destroy him. So Joseph got up and took the child and his mother while it was still night, and he left for Egypt. He remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet. Out of Egypt I called my son. Then, when Herod saw that he had been tricked by the Magi, he became very enraged and sent and slew all the male children who were in Bethlehem and all its vicinity, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had determined from the Magi. Then, what had been spoken through Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning. Did I skip something? No. Okay. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and she refused to be comforted because they were no more. So you want to stop there?
Yeah, that's a good place.
Okay, that's a good place to stop. So the latter part of that little section right there, where he had all the children 2 and under killed. In the New Testament in Acts, where Stephen is considered the first martyr, I always think about these kids right here.
That's good.
It's that always just kind of comes to my head, and I could be wrong on that, but I just feel like, when you call Stephen the first martyr, I think we need to consider these children.
I think Stephen was the first martyr of the gospel.
Okay.
The way, yeah.
Okay.
The way.
Gotcha.
They called the Christians back then.
That was the name of the church, right? Was the way.
Okay.
But even so, yes, these babies are obviously
Absolutely,
martyrs.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
And that's a good thought. I do think once again, we say it so much, but you got to stop and read, right? And then you think about the massacre of these innocent childs.
And how many it had to be.
There's no number given. But
Yeah.
imagine the amount of Jews that were under Herod's control.
Yeah.
Man, I mean, just terrible.
Yeah.
And maybe it has something to do with the resentment towards Jesus.
Well, like I said, I think it's more to where he knew that if the right person, if they got people following this guy that, like you said, they're Gentiles, and they're calling him the king, well, if they're going to call him a king, the Jews are definitely going to call him a king, and I can't let this king rise up.
Yeah.
So he's going to kill him.
Yeah, it's a terrible, terrible story. We do see that Joseph takes his family into Egypt. Once again, didn't know that was really safe, but it was a safe thing. But also, once again, it's fulfilling prophecy from Hosea.
Yeah.
In Hosea, it says that my son will come out of Egypt, even though my son's from all over the place. That's why this is so critical the way that this is written by Matthew. Matthew covers all the prophecies that we would most likely miss.
Yep.
You know, and goes through these things and say, hey, remember he had to come out of Egypt. You know, and I do think that is a big part of this. And then as you see the children being slain, man, it's a terrible time. But once again, that was another prophecy from Jeremiah. You know, these prophecies are told, man. One nugget on this, and it's not really a nugget, it's just something that Christians should understand. If you are somebody that follows prophets, modern day prophets, first and foremost, I would tell you be careful.
Yeah.
Second off, if they're only telling you good stuff, probably not a prophet.
Yeah.
If you had a prophet visit your church and he said, everybody this year you're going to have increase in wealth, health, and finances and all that stuff, I would be cautious to believe that, because he probably told the other church he visited the same thing. A prophet is not what people wanted to be, right? So it talked about Jeremiah. I love Jeremiah, but he's known as the weeping prophet. I mean, he hated his life. He was miserable. Why? Because he had to give messages like this.
Yeah, that had to be tough to say.
Imagine being that guy. You don't want to be that guy to go out and tell everybody, so they're going to kill all the children. And Rachel's going to be weeping over, and Rachel's one of the mothers of the house of Israel, right? It was Jacob's wife. And you're going to be weeping over the loss of all your children.
And weeping so much you can't even be comforted.
That guy doesn't get the red carpet invite to your church.
Yeah.
Like that's, being a prophet was a terrible thing, man. I don't want to say it was a terrible thing, but it was a burdensome thing.
Burden, yeah.
It was a tough task. Ain't no doubt about that.
It's just tough to be that guy. And I just want to give credit, because it's going to be so long before we actually get to reading these kind of books about Jeremiah. And I want to give them the credit, man, because Jeremiah foretold these things, Isaiah foretold these things, and they gave us an opportunity and Hosea, man, that if you got 30 minutes, read Hosea.
Yeah,
it's not long, power packed, man, and it is heartbreaking.
Another thing, you talk about Joseph being a righteous man, and how he was handpicked by God, and he's the right person to be in that situation, because what other person who knew what was going on back then, and God would have said, "Hey, go back to Egypt." Yeah. If it's not Joseph, if it's me or you, we're like, Egypt, are you out of your mind? Exactly. And then we start doing something else.
Very important when the angels show up.
Yeah,
what though? I think I would do whatever the angel told me. Could you imagine how mortified they were when these angels show up? In other gospels, it does go into how terrified they were.
Everybody.
Could you imagine that? They're not these little babies that you have on your. Your little trinkets wrapped in cloth. Yeah. These were some monsters. Just read Revelation. 7 heads, 50 eyes, and
most of the time, whenever it says that an angel shows up, people just automatically on the ground bow.
They fall.
And most of them are like, hold up, I'm not gonna get up. But,
and it's just like Joseph just taking it on the chin right here, like another angel came to me.
Yeah.
Kind of like what when I read that, it's like Joseph just taking it on the chin. You kind of think, with Forrest Gump, towards the end of his meeting, I got rich again. I met the president again. You know what I'm saying? It's like it wasn't no big deal. Yeah.
Now, for all you that are going to try to go comment, he's not comparing, Joseph to Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump did have a life on him, though.
Yeah, he did.
Wow.
He did.
Bubba Gump shrimp, man.
All right, so let's go to verse 19. It says, "But when Herod died, behold, an angel of the Lord," here he come again, "an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, 'Get up, take the child and his mother, and go into the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead.' So Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Then after being warned by God in a dream, he left for the regions of Galilee. And he came and lived in a city called Nazareth. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophets. He shall be called a Nazarene." And so that's chapter 2.
Yep. See, that's Matthew again telling us there's another prophecy fulfilled.
Yeah.
Yep. And two things that I take from what you just read. first and foremost, you notice that the angel always goes to Joseph. There's a reason for that, right? The man of the house.
Okay.
The man of the house is the leader of the home. There are certain people and things who give a lot of credit to Mary, and she deserves it. I don't want to take away credit from Mary, but Joseph doesn't get his just due. I mean, Joseph, the obedience, right. And then not only the obedience, but having the discernment to know what I'm about to say, that Archelaus is worse than Herod. Like, he was how bad was this guy? Yeah. That he was more scared to go there during his son's reign than Herod's reign.
Yeah, that says a lot.
Like, this dude had to be rough, man. And he was scared to go there. And so it says he was afraid to go there. And then God warned him in a dream.
Yeah.
And confirmed that, saying, hey, take him to Galilee. Right? And yes, that once again, that fulfilled prophecy, bringing him through Nazareth, and he became a Nazarene. But just having that discernment to know, hey, I know Herod's dead, but I remember what his kid was like.
Right.
Or maybe he had heard some stories or whatever the case may be. But I do think it's important to note that the angel came to Mary one time. After that, it continuously comes to Joseph. Yeah. You know, just to show that the man leads the home and that Joseph was responsible for the safety and the well-being of the Christ.
Yeah, I think what I'm gathering from chapter 2 is that, you know, Jesus, it took a lot for him to get to where, you know, he could actually just be born, right? Yeah. There was so many things that had to happen. There was, you know, his father had to be right in tune with God to where he could hear what God was saying, and he had to have, you know, the ability to do whatever God said. I think that, you know, Joseph just being a man of God, that's really what I'm getting out of this. And that Herod was a pretty bad dude, right?
And was worse.
Yeah, and Archelaus was worse, and there was a lot of kids that never got to meet Jesus that passed away because of Jesus, right? And so that's kind of what I got. Do you guys want to expand on any of that, or tell me if I'm wrong?
No, that's good. I mean, they didn't get to meet Jesus in the flesh. They're with him now. Cost them their lives, you know?
Yeah, and I would say, you know, the next time we have a podcast on this will be in Matthew 3, right?
Right.
And Jesus is a full-grown man at this point. One thing, you know, as a Christian, as we share our faith and we talk about Jesus, and a lot of people, if you're sharing your faith and you're adamant about it, sharing the gospel, you're going to come encounter with some people who's going to combat it. And they're going to tell you that Jesus was a fake. Jesus might have copied the life of other people like Osiris and things of that nature. We just read for the last 2 weeks about all these prophecies being fulfilled that Jesus could not have fulfilled his own self.
Yeah, that's right.
Because he was all God, but he was all man. And at this time, you see that he is in the hands of another man.
Right.
And Joseph, through his leadership and the angel's guidance, Joseph is helping fulfill prophecy after prophecy after prophecy. All of these could not have been manipulated by Jesus and his disciples. This is a powerful tool for somebody sharing the gospel, saying all of these prophecies were fulfilled. You know, as this certain prophecy of Nazarene was given in Judges. I mean, that's a long time before Jesus. That's 28 generations before Jesus was alive.
Yeah, you got to turn a lot of pages to get to that.
You know, I mean, this is a long time before he comes, and the prophecy is still being fulfilled. So it just, you know, I see God's workings in it. I see his hands in it. And just use it as an apologetic, right? Something to share the gospel with and say, well, what about all the prophecies fulfilled before he started talking?
Right.
There's so many prophecies fulfilled outside of his control that he could not have done.
Amen.
So, amen.
Well, good deal. Put a bow on chapter 2, and you know, just it's good stuff right there. Learning a lot. I'm learning a lot just sitting here listening to you guys talk. You know, there's a lot of things that opened my eyes just in these last 2 weeks, these last 2 chapters. So that's going to be it for chapter 2. That's going to be it for this week's episode on the Playbook, and so we'll be back with you next week for chapter 3. See you next time.